It looks like this will be an overlapping episode thingy, where I'm doing the next episode that you're watching now, the current episode, and Kaz is working on the previous episode in the past. Anyway, I'll stop confusing myself and you and tell you what I'm trying to achieve. I'm going to start the work on the pass-through, and in its simplest form I need to make a frame for the box and a frame for the truck cab. When I have made the frames, I need to add a lip to them, and that lip is not one of these, but one that the accordion rubber attaches to the concertina, the bellows, whatever you want to call them. Don't call them mic, they hate being called mic anyway. So yeah, let's see how it goes. I'm trying to find some mojo, some motivation, and it's a bit tough. We've had... Okay, I'm going to sidetrack to that. I know a lot of you don't like it, but we've had a lot of rain, bad weather, wind, so the progress has been very, 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 very limited, and it is bringing me down. So against my mental will, I'm out here trying to fix this now. Sometimes these real life work thingies aren't just as rosy as the YouTube mafia makes out to be. So I'm hoping that by doing good work, my head will also start feeling a little bit better. So let's see if we can make some frames and some lips and all of that stuff. And now I'm waffling. Anyway, let's get to work. I've asked Kaz to stop for a moment. Thank you. It's now several hours later, and we have a sail here. The bottom line here is that there's been more marks put on the cab, and I have 3 pages of notes and used the science machine to come up with sort of a plan. And the plan is roughly that there's going to be 2 box section uprights and 2 plates on the cab, and then corresponding things on the box. Because I don't have a garage, a workshop, enclosed workshop, I don't want to cut a hole and investigate and then start organically putting things in there. So we've decided that it is better that we start by making 2 frames for the apertures, and then once we have them done, we can cut a hole in the truck. It's a bit scary, all of this, and but I think we now have a way forward. I figured that there would be 2 ways of doing this. One way would be the one that I would prefer, and that is the completely organic way, where I just simply start cutting holes in the truck and I see what I find, and then I make a hole, an aperture for the bellows around that, and then I put a corresponding one on the actual box. However, because of weather, I think that is not the way to do it, so we will make the frames first with the apertures in them, and then one nice day I will simply start cutting holes in the truck and welding the frame into there. Yeah, I'm waffling again, so let's do some work instead. Please commence. Thank you for the break.
You've probably seen me do this before, but just in case you haven't, I'm using my metal cutting circular saw to cut these strips of 2.5mm sheet steel. I've clamped another piece to act as a guide. This results in a very straight cut and a very good finish. It's a bit fiddly to set up the guide, as I have to measure the distance from the saw's base edge to the blade and to remember on which side of the blade the measurements is, but once that's figured out, it's a doddle. One drawback with this saw is that it creates hot and sharp little flakes that burn into your skin and clothes. Please wear good protection when using it, especially for your eyes. Another drawback is that it uses a lot of power, so have a spare battery or 2 handy.
Whilst Kaz is working in the previous episode, I've been working on the current episode that's in the future. And for first day it's been quite productive actually. Apart from a lot of head scratching and a lot of poking around and jumping in and out of the truck, I have cut 14 pieces, and I believe that is one short of all the pieces. And what we have here is the two uprights for both the truck and the camper, and then there is the side flanges, and then there's some top and bottom plates. The thing that is missing is the lintel for the camper, which will be a 20 by 40. As these are galvanized, I still have a lot of preparation work before things can get onto the Spattermaster 5000 stage. But for now, pretty good start. It seems weird building something that's going to cut a big hole into the truck wall. Since the last clip in this episode, remember we're still working on the truck in real life, a few things have happened with these pieces. First of all, Kaz has ground half of the bars on each side a little bit so that the zinc coating has been removed, or at least part of it. Hopefully that'll weld better and it won't make me die. Another thing that we've done is we've rounded off one of the edges so that the bellows can slide on a little bit easier. For the sides, I have ground off most of the rust also to make it easy to weld. And for the top and bottom plate, as they are also zinc coated, we have ground off some of this zinc in the middle where the flanges are going to go, and also on the ends. I think that the next thing I need to do is I need to cut things to length and basically assemble it. Yeah. Plan as you go. Also known as no plans.
What you see me doing here is connecting the top or bottom of the frame with box section for the sides. A very simple design would have been to use box section all around, that is both sides and top and bottom, but to maximize the height of the crawl through, I decided to only use a piece of sheet steel at the top and the bottom. From a strength point of view, this isn't a problem either, as the frame will butt up against existing structures there. Once the side and top or bottom pieces are connected, I'm adding the bottom flange so that there's some stiffness in the structure. I'm spacing the flange in 20 mm from one edge, which puts it almost in the center. I follow that by adding the flange to the side piece. I found that building rectangles as two capital L shapes first works best when it comes to making a square rectangle. One does usually have a bit of leeway to finesse the parallelism when welding the two L's together. Once I have the two L shapes, I need to cut off the excess of the vertical flange and then clamp it all nice and squared on the table. After a few welds, I can turn it over. After making sure it's still square, I can tack weld the other side too.
Last session ended up with the truck cab frame being tack welded. And I think that means that the next thing I need to do is to fully weld it. I'm only going to do that on one side because of the grinding, and probably doesn't really need to be done either because we'll probably seam seal the edges anyway, but my inner perfectionist likes the idea of metal being the sealant rather than some goopy, plasticky, rubbery chemical. So it's time for the star of the show, Spattermaster 5000, to rock the world again. The flange is now fully welded, and I'm using that term quite loosely because, as usual with me and my MIG welding, things could definitely be a lot better. But to hide that, I'm going to use the dentist's favorite tool and hide some of my mistakes and my bad welding. With the welds ground down quite a lot and the tops and bottoms fully welded, I now need to create the radiuses for the corners. The radii for the corner, they need to be 50mm radius, and that means I need to do some CAD modeling and then cut some pieces out of that one. It doesn't happen very often on this channel, but you have just witnessed me cutting corners. I've cut 8 of them because I'm anticipating putting these corners thingies onto the box frame too, you know, ahead. My head's thinking ahead. What I need to do now is I need to clamp the frame onto the table in a squarey manner and then weld those ones in. That's how we will leave it today. It is now mechanically finished, I think. The finish isn't up to what my inner perfectionist wants, but very few things are. If you see footage in the future of me polishing this frame, then you know why. The corner pieces are in place, everything is welded, and the end result is actually quite good. I just would like to spend a few more days with a flap disc and make it really pretty. And then it's obviously going to be welded into the back of the truck where nobody's going to see it. So I'm trying hard not to do that. But anyway, done for today. I think the next step is to work on the other part of the frame, the box part of the frame. So anyway, Long day, productive. Here I have the IKEA version of the box crawl-through frame. All I need to do is get one of those little hex Allen keys and assemble it together. Or I could use the welder. Anyway, I need to clamp it and then weld it together. With the flange tack welded in place, I want to add some bracing at the top here. I'm gonna put in a cross here, so I cut this piece ready for Spattermaster 5000.
It's quite easy to weld the first piece of the cross into place. All I have to do is to make sure that the upright is straight by clamping it to the table, and then I can clamp the first piece of the top corner and diagonally to the other side. A few tacks later and it's in place. Now the other part is a little bit more tricky as they need to live on the same plane. Luckily I have a longer piece that I can use to clamp next to the existing piece. I can then mark the lengths and corner angles on this piece, take it off and use it as a template for the two final pieces. I use a protractor to copy the angles from the template to the new ones. Then I can clamp the template back on the frame as a guide for the two new pieces. I can push the new pieces into the corners and draw a line to get the length and the angle for the last cuts. A little bit of cleanup and I can clamp the new pieces in and align them with the help of some welding magnets. A few tacks and I can remove the clamps and the template stick and then put a few more tacks onto the other side. Then I can lay it down, clamp it and then fully weld it. Easy peasy, squeeze the lemon. This lovely morning I've spent a few quality hours with the angle grinders and had a little bit of a grind fest. The end result is this. Angle grind fest, not the other kind of stuff. Anyway, the major thing that I've done is that I have ground the welds on that cross and the generic welds on the actual frame. I wanted to get that done so that when it comes to the tedious job of grinding the flange welds, yeah, it's a term, because the next step is to weld the flange and the corners and the corner roundings and all of that, and so the next step after that is to grind it smooth and pretty, and I'm not looking forward to that, but that's a different story. As you can see, I have clamped down the frame as much as I can to avoid as much distortion as possible, and at the front bottom here, at the bottom of the frame I have clamped the 20 by 40 piece of box section just in a slight attempt to keep this thin piece of steel fairly straight. I know it won't be super straight, but straighter is better than not straighter. Anyway, I better stop making excuses and get on with the job.
Took a while, but now the flange is fully welded. I still need to make it pretty, but I have to leave that for another day because I'm absolutely knackered. So, see you another time.
York has made the frames for the pass-throughs, so I'm now just trying to clean up some of the welds a little bit to make them a little bit prettier because I'm a bit of a tart like that. And it's also been a really good opportunity to try a new tool that we've got, well, new accessory, whatever you want to call it. I'm using one of these paired polyfan discs, polyfan curve, and it's really cool because you can cut on the edge of the disc, or you can use the flap disc on the edge. And it's meant that I can finish up these welds really nicely, really quickly. So it's taken me about 5 minutes to get these looking really quite pretty, so quite happy with that.
Hey boys and girls, for you this is just a second after you saw the previous clip where we were working on these. For me, in reality, this is a year or maybe even more since we worked on this. And you've probably seen that other things have happened in between, but yeah, we had to pause that because the weather either got bad or too good meaning that it was too dry to actually weld outside. And then the bad weather came again, and then other projects came. Anyway, enough of that. The state where these are at the moment is a little bit annoying because what I need to do is I need to grind these corners nice and flat, and also the edge need to be non-aggressive so that the rubber doesn't chafe through. This is a very small amount of time with the grinder to get this right. However, it needs to be done before I can glue the concertina, the bellows. And you might know this, but the bellows comes as a sheet, i.e. 4 edges. And it needs to have 2 edges, i.e. it needs to be glued into a tube so that one edge goes on the cab and the other one goes on the truck habitat. Jeez, my brain is all over the place today. Apologies. Anyway, so a little bit of a dance with the angle grinders and things like that first, and then let's see if we can glue the bellows together and resume this project because it's way overdue like everything else. As you saw on the time-lapse, I have finessed the rim, the flange, and it's all good. I also, off camera, gave the metal a quick blast with the wire wheel just to get rid of most of the rust that had accumulated. The next thing I need to do is I need to lay this out somehow so that we can glue the concertina.
Flashback.
So. Would you believe it? Anyway, here goes. Ta-da! It's licorice! This is the bellows concertina. This is the thing that will connect the cab with the camper, because it needs to flex. Right.
End of flashback.
And I don't have a good plan for that yet. So I'm just gonna leave you be, and I'll get back to you when I have something more smart to say. So bye for now. See you in a few seconds in your world. I don't know if this is anything smart to say, but I had the two frames vertically positioned and clamped in place, and then I started to push the concertina in. And it turns out that the further I went around the perimeter, the wonkier it got. So I took them down and started investigating what seems to be the problem, sir. And what I was afraid of was either I had built them wrong, that the dimensions were different, or that I had ground the corners so much unevenly that the distance, the radius around the different apertures was different, and therefore causing one side to be longer or shorter than the other one. It turns out that they aren't built that wrong. Me being me thinks that 1 millimeter is quite a lot wrong, but I have to kind of say that it's sort of within spec. And the radii in the corners don't seem to be that much different either. However, what's different is various bending, heat bend issues. The two sides are not straight. In fact, none of the sides are actually super straight. And that means that I would need to clamp kind of 8 sides, and that doesn't really work easily, especially as I have to put the concertina inside here. I have here clamped this plate onto here, and obviously I can't do that if I have the rubber concertina there. So I don't really know what to do apart from that. I think the best thing to do is to put them up again, and I'll put them in a landscape mode rather than portrait mode that I had them in, and then I will start at the top, and then I will go both directions round to the bottom, and hopefully the distortion won't be that bad, and maybe we can work it out anyway. When it's on the truck, I'm hoping that I can weld it in so that it is straighter than what it is on the actual table here, because I can on the truck, when I start tack welding it, I can put reinforcements bars onto there and hopefully straighten it out. I can even put a jack or something in between it to push the sides out and do things like that. But here on the table it's a little bit more difficult, so let me try for a second time to clamp the frames up and put the concertina in and see what's what. Oh, and also one thing that threw me off was that the concertina wasn't cut very square either, so I thought that if I lined them up at similar starts it would work, but no, it was already wonky by that state. So maybe I should start with cutting one end of the concertina square. Anyway, organic engineering. Zang!
20 minutes later.
Okay, that seemed to have worked a lot better. I started attaching the concertina thingy on the top, and I then went both directions for it to meet here. And as you can see, there's very little distortion around the finish here. A nice little surprise is that is how not straight that one is. So I think the next thing I need to do is I'm going to cut this one straight, and then I'm going to match the other one up with it. And I might actually just butt glue them together Oh, stop giggling. That means that I can then take it off from here, and I can position the gluing situation better, because it needs to be glued on the outside, which is a bit difficult at the moment. So yeah, that's sort of what I'm trying to achieve at the moment. We'll see how it goes. I'm just making stuff up as I go along. It's not like I have a plan. So let's see where this ends up. Maybe we'll end up in another country, in another time. No. With a bit of luck, we'll have it glued.
I don't really know what I'm doing here. I'm just making it up as I go along. I thought that the best thing to do first was to get the ends square, or at least as square as possible. The first thing I do is to use the square to draw a line across, and then I use a knife and wire cutters to cut the metal clips on the sides. I then proceed to use the scissors to cut the corrugated part as straight as possible. I even use the angle grinder with a flap disc on it to sand it a bit. Then, when I put the bellows back down on the flanges, it seems like the cut is not square at all. So just for fun, I repeat the process. With one end cut, I can lay down the other end and mark the length of the bellows. Then I repeat the cutting process again, even to the detail that it wasn't done well the first time. For some reason I thought that this time I'll clamp down a piece of metal over the bellows and then use the angle grinder with a cutting disc to score the bellows. Then I proceed to cut them again using the wire cutters and scissors. To my surprise, the cut is quite square. A little bit of massaging with the scissors improves the fit even more. I then remove the bellows from the frames and start to try to fuse the two ends. I'm using super glue and activator for this initial bond. I try to stretch and clamp the bellows to the table, but it seems like they've got their own defiant mind and keep fighting my totally good and honest intentions. I also put some pieces of aluminium extrusions into the recesses for the flanges to align the two ends. A bit of super glue, some weighting, more super glue and weighting. Repeat until one side is done. Then I flip the bellows to the other side, and of course, when using super glue, it sticks in places where it wasn't supposed to. So I used a knife to separate the corrugations. Then it's more super glue, weighting, cutting, super glue, weighting, cutting, and so forth. Eventually the bellows are glued enough that I can proceed to using the rubber patches and the contact cement. To do this, I stretch the bellows on the table to get them as flat as reasonably possible. Then I clean the bellows, put some heavy pieces of steel on top of them and mark out where the patch goes using some tape. Finally, it was time to apply the goo to both the bellows and the rubber strip, and then let it dry for a bit before squishing it all together. The whole thing seems to have a mind of a dog who's just found an amazing stick, been thrown a ball and seen a squirrel. Fighting against the rubber and bellows seems quite pointless for a while. I flip the bellows over and try to push the rubber sheet into the grooves and the flanges. A while later, it's time to repeat the process for the other side. This time I'm using a slightly thicker piece of rubber and I tape it to a sheet of steel to keep it flat whilst applying the contact cement. This side goes a bit better thanks to the experience with the first side and the thicker rubber.
The first side, that's the inside of the bellows, did not go well at all. The major problem was that the moment I put the contact adhesive onto the contact cement, to be correct, onto the rubber, it just curled up. There was a chemical reaction there that did something to it, expanded or something like that, but basically it turned into a sausage from a sheet of pasta, from a lasagna sheet to a sausage. And then I had to do a lot of finessing. That's another word for screwing about with stuff and trying to make it better. And it's still not very good, but I'm going to leave it to dry at least overnight, and then I'm going to see if I can finesse it some more to make it acceptable. This side I used a thicker piece of rubber, and that did not have the same reaction at all. And then putting it on went a lot easier, went a lot better. So I'm quite confident that this one will work well, and this is obviously the outside, which is the waterproof side. There's a few pieces here that doesn't look too good when it comes to water ingress, and I don't really know what to do with that, but maybe I will finesse them
later once it's all dried and it won't come apart by my finessing. Anyway, it's late on a Friday evening and I'm done, so we'll continue this at another time when it's convenient for me. Hopefully you will still be watching, so catch you at the next clip.
Morning, good folks. Another day here in the Castle of Chaos, the Empire of Dirt. I have just squirted some brake clutch cleaner onto the aperture there. The plan is to squirt it with some zinc primer so that it has a small chance of surviving rust. Let's blast that with some zinc primer and let it dry during the day before anything more happens to it. So let's get on with stuff. Let's hope today is a productive day. And as you saw in the time lapse, the aperture holes are now painted with rust preventing paint, about 75% with 98% zinc primer, and the remaining 25% with red oxide primer. They will be now basking there in the sun until something more exciting needs to happen to them, the taller one is the one that goes on the box, so we're probably better off just sticking that somewhere to the side, because I doubt I will be able to do anything with that one for probably a month or two. But the candidate that is in jeopardy is the one that goes on the cab.
Morning.
So the task at hand here is that we need to get the seats out, the headliner out, we need to cover the dash, we need to cover the floor, the doors need to be protected, and then eventually we need to get the windows out and start covering them up with some steel. So yeah, plenty of things to do. Stop talking, let's do stuff. As usual, I was thinking that everything needs planning and proper sequence and stuff like that, but then I also realized that time is a factor and getting stuff done is sometimes more important than not doing it and planning it instead. So let's cut this steel out and see what happens. Hey Oxy. What? Need your help? Would you carefully push out the window at the top?
Like pushing fortune?
Yeah, from here, push to me. Right. Tickety-boo. And that's as easy as that. Yeah, I'll have a better look at this seal for the next one, so I'll try to be a little bit smarter. It's not difficult for someone that's as daft as me, so.
There's no going back now.
Well, the reversed gear still works. Please send help.
Yeah, please send help.
Said I'd look at the other seal, but I couldn't make any sense of it the 30 seconds I looked at it, so I'm just cutting it away again. Hey Jacko, if you're watching, I keep my finger on here and the blade release method keeps slipping, so please fix that and send me a new one. Thanks, bye. I don't think he cares about me. When it comes to removing these rubber seals, you have to be flexible. Okay, we can try again. Okay, that's good. That's good. That's fine. Thank you. Cool.
Does this mean it's now convertible?
No.
Seeing Crazy Kaz removing the interior, I'm very pleased that I decided early to build all parts of the truck in a way where things can be disassembled for service and modifications. Every part in the cab is attached with bolts, which means that we don't have to fight with brittle plastic clips and such things. It bolts on and comes off just as easily. The interior of the camper will be built the same way. One day.
Right, a bit of intermission here. I can't remember where I left you apart from taking the windows out. I have done some scribing and measuring here. Kaz is working on taking the interior out. We just removed the headliner. Everything seems fine up there. One of the things that we obviously discovered when we took this off is that this lip goes a lot far in there, and you know, I could have seen it from the inside and realized it. One of the things that bugs me is, as you can see, the headrest is the backrest and the headrest is very far back, and I've actually pulled the seat forward a notch or two, and this distance here would be very useful to get a little bit extra space in the cab. It's not critical, so the reason I'm talking to you about this is that the easiest way to fill these holes is for me to cut a piece of steel, and then we just bond it with Sikaflex and add seam sealer on the outside and all of that thing, and just put it in there. There's minimum warpage and it'll be waterproof and everything like that, and this profile where it goes in here, if we put the piece of sheet metal on to there, then I doubt that's going to cause very much concern for water leakage. And at the bottom it's even better because the lip is on the back there. But yeah, this extra little space, it would be very handy for a little bit of insulation or stuff like that, because we do plan to put stuff onto the back of this, because this is a very noisy truck as is, and any quietness that we can achieve would be a very good thing. I'm already complicating absolutely everything and things are taking too much time. I don't think I can deviate from the simplicity of just simply putting this piece of steel in here and leaving it be. Another option would be to bond onto this surface here. And that would actually be a little bit better, and there's enough surface here to do the bonding fine. And then I could actually put an angle, I could bend an angle onto the sheet metal here to prevent water
just simply being lodged in between here. So a bit of extra seam sealer and stuff in there underwater should be fairly good to not run into here. However, because things are rounded here in the corner, that would mean even more complications. So I keep going back and forth with this and start thinking that, you know, it's probably good enough to just put it on here. And no welding means no grinding. It's not the optimal solution, but from an efficiency point of view, it is probably superb. So I'm in the process of cutting out some pieces of steel that will go into the apertures there and then be bonded in place. We're sort of ready to do the bonding of these panels, and we tried to devise some form of a clamping method. At the bottom here, it's obviously quite easy, just a simple, small, tiny G-clamp, and we should be fine. However, at this other end it was a bit more difficult, so I said we'll put a threaded bar in here with an old off-cut wedge piece of metal, and that'll keep that one in place. It doesn't need to be clamped like gluing as such, it just needs to be held in place whilst the mastic, the seam sealer, the bonding material cures. And then at that point Kaz said that how about using VHB tape? So of course that's a much better idea. So we're going to use VHB tape to actually fix the panels in place, and then we are going to use seam sealer to do the edges both inside and out to make sure that it's all super duper waterproof and all over engineered and all that stuff. But that's kind of what it looks like. Then tomorrow I guess we can start cutting a hole in the truck, a bigger hole. Crazy stuff.
The truck may be old, but that doesn't mean we can't use modern methods for fitting the panels. Firstly, I put some VHB tape around the aperture, and then we trim off the excess to keep the weight down. After the panels are in, it's time for some glue to keep the stuff on the outside out and the stuff on the inside in. I've tried many different methods for trying to get the joints to look pretty. This time I'm trying a paintbrush and it's working pretty well.
Another day, and this one is going to be a hot one. It's about 11 o'clock in the morning and we're just about to start, and I think we're approaching 30 degrees C already, so we are going to be baking today, which is fine because I'm a muffin anyway. Sorry, I apologize. Anyway, we need to take that off and see what we actually created yesterday, and then we need to cover up the interior of the cabin, of the cab. We need to cover the glass and the floor and the dash and stuff like that before we can cut a hole. So that's sort of where we're starting the day, and let's see how this turns out. Smoking.
Morning. Remember, boys and girls, always use protection. Not like that. Because we're cutting a hole in the back of the cab, we need to protect the inside of the cab from any damage. So cardboard for the windscreen, welding blanket thingy for the floor, and lots of rags and covers and things to protect the dash and everything else in there. So I'm off to play DIY and do some CAD work of a different sort.
And whilst Kaz is going to apply some protection, I'm going to turn this piece of metal into a steering wheel puller. Below the three-pointed star There's a nut inside here. There is 2 threaded holes on each side of the axle, the steering shaft. The idea is that you thread 2 M10 bolts into those 2 side holes, and then you use a 3rd bolt to push on here. That's why I have now marked this metal bar with 2 outer center punch marks and a center punch mark. And the idea is now that I'll drill the outside ones out to house an M10 bolt each, and then I'll thread the inner one for an M10 bolt too. Off to the drill press. Diggity-boo. There's the tool. All we need to do is to put these in here. They don't need to be tight or anything like that. They just need to have enough purchase there on the threads so that we don't rip the threads out. And then another one in there that we threaded, as you saw. And these are nothing special, it's regular bolts. And there we can see things are happening. Come on. Come on. I have a feeling this is going to just bump into my face, but it seems like we might have succeeded without any facial damage. Hi, easy peasy, squeeze the lemon, rock and roll. It's time to start cutting things up. Kaz has done a fantastic job of covering the cab on the inside there. I have scribed some lines. You might not see them there, but there's at least some form of lines. I know the approximate height, well, I do know the exact height of the aperture, but I don't know exactly where it's going to go height-wise, because that is determined on the structures on the inside. One thing that we need to do before we start cutting hole in the actual rear of the rear wall is that we need to remove this one. It's the holder for the breather hoses and all of those things, and it's welded onto the cab, so it needs to be moved. Unfortunately, access is a little bit limited, so we're going to see if we can use the reciprocating saw to get to that one. Anyway, and this is what it looks on the inside. Quite a lot of beams there that need to be butchered. So if you're now saying that we are compromising the structure of the cab, then yes, you are correct, but we are also adding structure to it in form of the frame of the actual aperture. It's not just a flange. We're not just cutting a hole there. And the Mercedes builder's manual, or whatever it's called, states that if you cut any of these bars, you lose the overrolling certification. In other words, the cab is certified for rollover as it's built. I don't think that we will have issues with cab rollover with this structure being there. So whilst the cab is potentially weakened a bit, it is not a danger. So also wherever the seat belts are will not be compromised at all. So hopefully the structure will be equivalent or stronger, and if not equivalent, then hopefully not much weaker than the Mercedes engineers intended. So just to put your mind at ease. Anyway, Time for some cutting.
Okay, boys and girls, here goes. To say that this is nerving is an understatement, but yeah, it's not gonna get done unless it's done. And for the inaugural crawl through. Ta-da! It's not really crawl, not really stand. Right now we're both absolutely beat, but there is one thing that hopefully we'll get at least somewhat done today, and that is that we want to remove the paint on the edge of the aperture on the hole, so that we can hopefully start with welding the next time rather than preparation. So the hole is not perfect. It seems like I'm grinding and finessing and grinding and finessing, and then suddenly it's bigger than I thought. Yeah, but it's in there, and it's all pretty tickety-boo.
Okay, boys and girls, it's a bit earlier than normal here. I'm trying to beat the heat because today might be hot as it has been in the last week. From the last clip you saw that we cut a hole and we know that the aperture fits in there. Since then we took the stuff out of the cab to be able to shut the doors, and earlier this morning, before the real work, Kaz was out here and she was covering up the interior of the cab again, and then we lifted up a Spattermaster 5000 here. Now I need to start fitting the frame into there and need to start tacking it in place. You can probably see on my hair that there's a lot of wind, so I'll need to fight that somehow too, and everything is very dry, so I'll probably should wet down the ground a bit just in case, and so forth. So enough procrastination, let's start doing things. A few minutes later and I've made myself this wind shelter, and I think this is gonna work fairly well. We'll see if I need to shelterify this some more. Yeah, I'm already knackered. Let's quit. No, we don't quit. A few minutes later and I have sprayed the whole area around the truck with water, so hopefully that'll have time to dampen all the pine needles and leaves and other stuff here that are easy to catch fire. I might probably dose it with some more water before we start getting into things, but I think the next thing I need to do is actually start fitting the frame. Just as I was about to place the frame onto the eminent truck, I realized that Mercedes and its engineers has, in their infinite wisdom, decided that this here is one height and that is the same, and this one is different and that one is different and these ones are different. So as my reference, the idea is that the frame will go and meet these ones. So this surface here, which is the one that sticks furthest back, will meet the edge of the frame. So these planes will be the same. And then the little dip here is okay, because that one we can play by ear. But then I need to place this one, which is the next big one. And it turns out that it is about 4 millimeters further forward, truck orientation wise, than this one. And then you'd think that this one would be the same, but no, it's not. This one is about 2 millimeters. So I now need to make sure that the frame corresponds to these properly. They couldn't make it simple. German engineering. Anyway, I'm sure there's a perfectly valid reason somewhere in a drafting office somewhere in Germany. So with that infinite amount of millimeterish knowledge, I can now hopefully start clamping. We'll see. Right, my peeps, the frame is now tack welded in place, as you can see up there to down there. I tried to do some welding on the side here and it turned out quite well. So with a bit of seam sealer on top of it, you would never know that I can't actually weld. I've also welded this bit in here, and that was burnt on with maximum attack. What I can't do is weld the bottom here under the lip, and the reason for that is that I can't bend my eyesight and I don't have a U-bend on the welder. We will have to wait with that bit until the cab is tilted up. Anyway, I'm going to take a break and then I'm going to get into my Back to the Future suit and start slowly and carefully welding the whole thing. And I must say, it does sound actually sturdier than it sounded before. My memory might be wrong. It's very good, but a bit short. So, yeah, it looks pretty good and pretty pleased. Break and back to work. And that was a lovely lunch. Kind of want to go to bed now, but things need doing. So let me get into my suit, my welding helmet, and let's get cracking. That didn't go too badly. Some parts of the welds look okay, some of them look horrible, as usual. I had a quality control CAS here and we found a few pinholes that need to be bizzed, so we're not done yet. And then it would be good to run the corner flap disc on some of these, or maybe even the angry end. Don't really want to run the angry end, it's so angry. It should be more peaceful, you know, man, dude. And on the inside, these ones here and that one there, I want to cap them. Not gangster kind of cap, but make sure that these piece of the steel is anchored to the frame more for rigidity and for safety. Same thing goes with this lip here. It's only welded on the outside skin. That bit is structural, and this is the new frame that it's welded in. So a couple of beads here would probably be a good thing. Maybe I can weld the corners there that I couldn't weld from the outside. Lighting. Camera film making is difficult. As you can probably understand from my stuttering and my poor choice of vocabulary words, good example, I'm getting a bit tired. Whilst this isn't that physically demanding, it's always when you are crouched down in some odd position that takes the juices out of you, and it's hot and I've been sweating and all that stuff, and I'm old and out of shape, so it's all extra doubly, triply difficult. So I'm gonna keep at it for a little bit longer and see if we can win this. If I get primer on the outside here today, that would be really good. If I don't, no rain in the forecast, so it's not a biggie, but a little bit more, little more work. Yeah, let's do that. I forgot to say that there's a piece here, a little lip cut off from the that was the previous structure here, and I'd like to cut that one off too. So hopefully maybe the Sawzall, the reciprocating saw, can do a nice cut like that, and then the rest is easy to grind off. But yeah, it should have done that before I welded this in, but hindsight schmindsight. Anyway, let's work. And as usual, I spent a little bit too much quality time with the grinder to be efficient. But the end result is that most of the welds are now fairly uniform, and the ones that were protruding, i.e. furthest back in the truck direction, are now flat-ish. And that is slightly important because there needs to be a certain distance between the back of the truck cab and the camper. The builder's manual says that it needs to be 70 millimeters, so having extra protruding stuff here is probably not a good idea. Will it ever matter? Probably not, but let's try to stick to the book at least. Now, before I quit for today, I'm going to try to fix those pinholes, and I'll probably grind those a little bit too if necessary. I'll leave the inside stuff for another day. And that didn't go too badly at all. It did knacker me quite a lot though. The status is at the moment that I have vacuumed here a little bit, and I've tidied up a little bit. Yeah, what I need to do next is what I'm trying to say is that I need to wipe it off with some alcohol, and then I'm going to give it a coat of zinc primer so that it doesn't rust. Alright, go. Needs to dry off a little bit before we can take down my the wind protection. So that's what it's going to look like for now, and we'll continue another day, another time. I'm beat. Good night. Oh, don't go away, don't go away. There's more, I promise. Way more.
Now we've cut a great big hole in the truck, these beams need some tidying up. I'm using the angle grinder to cut these at 45 degrees, before using the flap disc to finish them off and remove the paint for welding. I'm getting quite comfortable with the angle grinder when used normally, and as you can see, the passenger side went pretty well. However, when it gets to the driver's side, I had to turn the angle grinder upside down as I couldn't find a mirrored one anywhere. I wasn't at all comfortable with this, so I had to call him outdoors for some help. Hello, afternoon, morning, don't know what time of day it is. I'm absolutely knackered. Feels like I haven't achieved very much today, but lots of little things and little annoying things. So there was some extra metal there, so I got rid of that, ground it flat, made it look pretty. Yoko, tack welded or fully welded on the outside the frame or the pass-through frame yesterday, and I've cleaned up the inside, removed the paint so he can put some stitch welds on the inside, and I've cut these off here to make them look pretty, which now leaves a great big hole. So I've made some CAD templates, which we're now going to make some caps for and weld on and make them look even prettier. But not today, because I'm knackered.
Rightio peeps, another day here in the Empire of Dirt. As we finished off last session, we had these fancy CAD templates turned into steel, which now go in these pieces here. Sorry you can't see anything because of the contrast, but life is what it is. That means that now it is time for the Spattermaster 5000 to step up to the plate again and cover me in blisters. Once these are welded in, I'm probably going to give it a few welds around the edges and do the top there as discussed. The reason for doing a little bit on the inside here is just to give it a little bit of extra beef to attach to the back wall, just in case. Once all of this is done, I've been thinking about that there's going to be probably plywood here. Plywood because it's fairly easy to screw into and make attachment points for various gadgets and contraptions and things that we might need. There's going to be a plywood piece here for the cladding, and then the inside is going to be insulated with the Island Oat silent coat that you might be familiar with from the floor and the rest of the cab. And this is the reason why we didn't do this, because of the hole when we did the floor and the cab. Anyway, I'm waffling, let's get back on track. This is going to be insulated and all nice and tickety-boo. However, it's pretty easy to attach a piece of plywood to these pieces here because these two are the same plane, and I can easily just put some awesome riv nuts in here and that will be fine. I don't think the plywood needs any strengthening here, but it does need strengthening here. I think that I need to weld in at least one tab somewhere here on the wall, and the same on that side. For the top bit, I haven't really figured things out yet, but I do think that what we need to do is that we need to have two levels here, one closer to the window bit here because of the extra space that we want for the backrests of the seats. Anyway, that's just thoughts and wafflings, nothing concrete, no plans yet. Current plan is to weld in these ones, so let's get going with that, and at least we get something done. Okay, boys and girls, Kaz is in here playing with the angle grinders and stuff like that, and she's doing a great job erasing my mistakes and my inadequacies here. But whilst she's doing that, I'm trying to figure out how we will attach the cladding to this, as I mentioned earlier. And I come to the conclusion that yes, we should have a bracket down there, and between this surface and this surface there's 37 millimeters, which I still need to confirm. That means that I can hopefully take a 40 by 40 by 3 and remove one side of it, and then I should have basically the absolute super duper correct standoff into which I can attach a riv nut. And talking of riv nuts, I think I'm going to put one in here and one in there and one in there. This could be filled with either spray foam or just regular insulation foam or something. We will put the anti-vibration mat on there. It will probably be clad with something simple like a sheet of aluminium, because I need to make a bend here. And that brings us to the higher part, which is going to be as close as possible to this one. The foam that we have that we used in the ceiling is a sticky back foam that is designed for soundproofing in vehicles and things, is 10 millimeters, which means that from this surface a standoff of 10 millimeters should be a good idea. Luckily, the difference between this surface and this surface is more than 10 millimeters. If we had to have this surface higher than the frame, then that would probably mean that I have to drill into the frame, which I don't like for waterproofiness and rustiness issues like that. That kind of brings us into where we should attach things here, which is these two yellow bits here. If I can have a 10-ish millimeter captive nut there and there, that's great. Up there is a little bit more tight, not like a toiger in this case. In the corner there we could have one, and that one is a bigger problem. So the solution I've come up with is that in that corner I will weld it to the frame. That is easiest, and by it I'm going to show you now what I've come up with. For each side, this is the material, and the ones that I said that I would just need a 10 millimeter standoff, I'm going to use the 12 millimeter ones. These are the slugs that we drilled out for the bearings for the tail lift. They are a little bit chunkier than I would like, but you know, can't get everything in life, can you? By drilling and tapping an M6 hole in there, we have 12 millimeter standoff. As I said, we can do the two bottom ones easy peasy, squeeze the lemon, and the top corner one can also probably be done with one of these. And as I said, we can weld one to the frame, and here is a square cutoff that I used a square hole saw when we cut. No, I didn't, it's just a cutoff. But it's the same thickness, so I can hopefully align them up fairly well, all four of them. And like I said, a 40 by 40 with a riv nut in should be pretty good standoff once I remove one wall and put the riv nut in the other side. That's the plan for attaching the cladding for the back wall on the Unimog cab. Right, boys and girls, Kaz was out here yesterday putting seam sealer around the frame, on the inside of the frame, and the outside of the frame, and the outside of the cab, and the inside of the cab. So that should now be cured enough for us to screw it up again. And by that I mean that I should have technically welded on the panel mounts for the inside wall panels before she did that, so that the welding wouldn't damage any of the seam sealer. However, as real life happens, this was the way to get ahead yesterday. You can probably guess that the next thing that I need to do is that I need to try to weld those thingies blobs onto here. And you saw me make those, which are here. Now, the bottom line here is that I'm not really happy with the amount of metal on them. I know it sounds absolutely crazy, but
I don't think this is the size that is needed for that. I like that there's a big surface area, which means that squishing a panel onto it will be not a pinpoint a pressure point there. I'll see what I'll do with the round ones, but these ones, the tabs that will go on the top inside of each panel, I will definitely cut those into smaller ones. They're definitely too big. I might make some speed holes in those too, just because it's a nice day. Okay, boys and girls, after a little bit of painful heat absorption by my fingers, we have this. As you know, we started out with this. Let's put them on ye old scale here. 97 and 50. 49. That's almost 50% weight reduction just by doing that. And now you're probably sitting there laughing at yourself and thinking that that's not worth it. And no, it's probably not worth it in the one of these. But if you apply this philosophy to absolutely everything you do on the truck, then maybe there is some yield to it. But also, I like this. I think this looks nice. I know that one day I'm going to remove that panel and I will see this. And I will remember that I put a bit of extra effort into making this, and that makes me warm and fuzzy on the inside. How do the other YouTubers do it? I guess I just have to cut this one myself.
20 minutes later.
The artists formerly known as the round ones are now these sort of lozenge pill shapes, and they are now 108 grams, which is more than 50%. These ones are 101 grams, and they are the offcuts, and keep in mind that what's missing from the calculation is the angle grinder blade. So we have a 50% weight saving there too. And whilst we're doing stupid stuff, I'm going to just complete it all by putting some speed holes in these two. You know, let's go full mental as we're at it. Okay, silliness has ensued. It has happened, and now this bracket's modified, this one's unmodified. We put the unmodified on there. 69 grams. Modified bracket, 60 grams. So 9 grams of all that effort. So this one had the least yield, but it looks quite nice, doesn't it? Anyway, let's do the second one. I've completed my silliness for this time. I did some scientifics here on the calculator machine. It turns out that the total saving is around 224 grams. And that's in itself not very much. Put it in slight perspective, it's about 42% of a bottle of beer. That's including the glass bottle and the cap and everything. Why is this at all important? If this happens all over the time, in every aspect of the build, then suddenly we have several bottles of beer or liters of water or liters of diesel that we can use instead of carrying extra weight in the form of a panel attachment. Whilst this in itself, in its atomic state, doesn't actually matter at all, in the grand scheme of things, shaving off a little bit of weight here and there can have a huge impact. Apart from that, it just makes me feel a bit better to have things done nicely. That means at this stage that I'm now out of excuses to not crawl into there and weld it. But I'm going to take a little bit of a break, have something to eat. So I'll be back after this transition. So what did you think of that transition then? Pretty neat, hey? Anyway,
It's now time to try to figure out exactly where these go and where I need to remove paint, and then it's time for Spattermaster 5000. But let's start by removing the paint and making sure that I've managed to get this right. Situation is that I have removed the paint from where the tabs thingies are gonna go, the captive nut thingies. I have decided how to position the bottom one, and I have decided what height these ones should be. I have cleared the bit up there, and I have devised a method to make sure that that one is at the correct plane. That wasn't particularly comfortable, but I think it's done. I tried to angle the lozenges, the pill-shaped things, so that I could weld from both sides, and I seem to sort of have succeeded in that. The positioning of these aren't very important, because they will have to be organically made anyway, the panels. And I'm only going to make one for this side and one for the other side, so there's no mass manufacturing or anything that actually needs to fit apart from this one. And it's very easy to put a sharpened bolt in the hole there and basically just stamp a piece of material onto it, and then you have the center punches for the hole. So it's no biggie at all if they are a little bit wonky or out of place. The biggest one is that we don't position them anywhere where we might need some fastener or something like that for some other things. But the welds are there, they're not pretty, they're very sturdy. On to the next side, and I can't be bothered to film that. I'll see you after I've done that.
Moments later.
So you can barely see it, but I have obviously burned through the original paint, and I have covered that with some zinc primer so that it won't rust, and I obviously did that on all the places where we burned through, and that kind of gives it away though that all of these are done, including the other side that you didn't see. At the moment the bottom panel here has only got one fastener, so we need 3 more, and I was wondering how could I make sure that we have at least some form of symmetry, so my CDO doesn't go crazy about stuff. So I thought that if I put a bolt into these two, then I can butt off the ruler like that, and that gives me a point here to scribe, and then I can just have the diameter of the bolt there to get the location on the same spot. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now, and then Kaz promised that she could do the drilling, because I'm fatigued and I don't want to do it. I'm feeling a bit lazy. Let's put a time lapse on, and you can see these kind of shenanigans too.
morning, boys and girls. Came out here yesterday to try to make some progress on that thing there, but instead I got in here and started cleaning and organizing like crazy. So now the workbench is workbenchable, the welding table is weldable, and even that shelf there is way more organized. So today I don't really have any excuses to muck about with that, so I have to do that. Let's see if we can make some progress. Finally! Okay, boys and girls, I have evaluated the situation and I've taken the tarps off the truck, and the first thing I want to do is I want to block the whole of the pass-through with a temporary device. Temporary in this case meaning several years potentially. Let's hope not, but we have to prepare for that. And it's nothing more than a piece of plywood that is attached on the inside with some tabs or something like that. I haven't figured that bit out yet, so I'm just going to cut the piece of plywood first. It's a scrap piece of plywood that was has been repurposed or upcycled. The plywood piece needs to be 655 by 980, so I've got the track saw out and I'm just gonna give it a quick cut, and can hear Kaz coming here, which is perfect because I want her to hold the piece of plywood here. Come along, let's have fun, let's have fun. After I had cut this panel that had been upcycled several times to size, I thought that it needed a bit of a freshening up. Here you can see me doing some light sanding and scraping off some old glue residue. To get an even finish, I had to rotate the panel to make sure that the sunlight reached all parts so I could finish the light sanding. Naturally, I had to do this on both sides due to the phenomenon of shadows. If you want a decent finish quickly, I highly recommend light sanding. It's not very heavy work. I kind of knew this would be the case and deliberately made it on the bigger side, and there's a few natural issues here. The first one is that this bottom bit here isn't straight, and I'm aware of that. I did measure the corners because the corners are the ones that should be exact. I'm now going to re-measure in the centers. I'm also going to take a little bit off the width, just because it doesn't fit that well on the width either. Let's trim some off and do this a few more times. As usual, organic engineering. Ta-da! Looks like I need to take about 5mm off on in both directions. Right, after several trial fits, that now works. And I'm going to take a break, have something to eat, and then I'm going to come back and see if I can fasten it from the inside somehow. So let's just do a straight cut here, and I'll be back. 3, 2, 1. I decided that I can use small pieces of the 2.5mm sheet steel to make angled tabs. The first thing I did was to measure them and then scribe and center punch for a hole for the bolt that goes into the panel. Then it was off to the drill press to drill the 6mm holes whilst trying not to get my fingers ripped off by the drill biting into the material. The next step was to bash the tabs to form an angle, and as I did this on the same line as the hole was now oblong, and to make sure the bolts fitted through, I quickly re-drilled the hole. On the panel I marked the 6 locations where I thought it was a good idea. Then I drilled the holes for the nuts, which I think are called T-nuts, probably because some of our ancestors put them in their tea. In an attempt to seal the panel, I added a window sealing strip to the edge.
I'm now ready to put this onto the truck for the first time. This is the bottom of the inside of the latch door thingy, and what I'd like to do is I'd like to put 2 pieces of wood here just to support it, so that it leaves a little bit of a gap below there. But let's see if it works first, and then I'll add those in a little bit. But it's sort of done, bar paint and that thing, so if it works, let's see what happens. It seems fine. I can't see any daylight coming through. I haven't been on the outside to check yet, but this is pretty sturdy and good. I don't think we need any other bracing in here. Like I said, I want to see if I can raise it all up a little bit and then put some wedges underneath there, and then put a couple of blocks here on the bottom so that it's more wedged to the top than to the bottom. That way any water that pools down there hopefully can dry out rather than keep this from swelling. But the window seal strip that I put on seems to do a great job. It seems good. I think this will protect the cab from the elements during the build process. So let's see if I can get those blocks put in. Okay, boys and girls, at the moment this is what it looks like from the outside. As I said, paint needs to go on. Now I don't know what to do about these extra long bolts. I thought that they were the right length, but there seems to be a lot of squish and bend, which requires long bolts so that you can squish and bend them into place. I have left these 2 metal plates there to squish it up until the glue has dried on the other side with the screws. It's very tight up here, which is kind of what I want. Hopefully this will now, with the paint, will be weatherproof. Those blocks I put in there, that one obviously cracked, which is why there's a clamp there. Otherwise these clamps here worked really well. Everything is nice and tight. But yeah, it turned out fine. Bit of paint, a few more little things, and it's done. Which means that we can now move on to the front wall of the box, the habitat box. Yeah. Anyway, enough talking.
Gals and geezers, I'm sorry, but we're gonna have to cut this one short here. There's 1 more hour to show, but that's gonna have to be in another episode. So thanks for watching, and hope to see you in the next one.